Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Hawks Latest, your number one source for news, updates, rumors, opinions, and you guessed it, the latest and the greatest regarding the Atlanta Hawks. I'm your host, Zach Langley, aka Langley ATL. Today, we've got a full slate of updates to cover. This is the 95th episode of Hawks Latest presented by FanArt, so we are really creeping up on 100. I can't wait to get there. It's been super fun covering the team on this channel. So, we've got a jam-packed episode today because Trae Young put out a pretty fiery response to Patrick Beverley. This has been super entertaining over the past 24 hours or so. They've been going back and forth, and Trae's latest response, his response to Patrick Beverley's main statement that he made in his podcast was super entertaining, to say the least. But we're going to talk all about that. And also the underrated signing of Luke Kennard. There's an underrated aspect about that specifically that I want to break down a little bit, and why a potential weakness that Kennard has isn't really going to be too much of a weakness here in Atlanta. We're also going to break down Jeff Teague. He made a bold prediction about Kristaps Porzingis, the newly acquired big man that is going to be suiting up for the Atlanta Hawks next season. Teague, the Hawk legend, made a comment about him, and if he's right, the Hawks might win the championship. And then finally, at the very end, we're going to take a look at a guy who is available in free agency now, and it's kind of unexpected. I don't know why this team released him, but they did, and so now he is a pretty strong target for the Atlanta Hawks. So there's a lot of ground to cover as the Hawks prepare for training camp. So without further ado, let's waste no more time and get right into it and talk about first up, the beef that everyone has been talking about over the past 24 to 48 hours. Trae Young and Patrick Beverley, a NBA superstar and a career role player who's out of the league. What started as a mild exchange on Twitter, it escalated into a headline-grabbing back and forth. And there hasn't been too much response, too much back and forth, but the response that Trae put out to Beverley's initial podcast episode is what really made headlines. So Trae started it off by making a lighthearted jab about Beverley never making an all-star team. It wasn't really anything. It was just kind of like Pat Bev made a comment about, how the All-Star players didn't really try in the All-Star game, which kind of has a point there. But then Trae Young responded and then pretty much just called him out and said, "Relax, let us speak for ourselves." While most fans or really anyone would have brushed that off, Beverley clearly did not. On his podcast, Patrick Beverley ended up going on a rant that lasted a few minutes, saying, quote, "I don't think he's in a position to speak. I don't think he's won enough to even speak to me like that or tweet me like that." All right, that's kind of the main focus of what Patrick Beverley said in his entire response. But basically, 2 nights ago, Trae Young fired back with a full 12-minute YouTube video. It was awesome. And let's be clear, this was not a half-hearted reply. This was a dismantling of Patrick Beverley's career. Young stayed respectful. He kind of just sat in front of a camera and just pretty much broke down why, Patrick Beverley shouldn't be speaking to him like this. And he had a point, and he kind of destroyed him. He picked apart Beverley's comments line by line, just pretty much disproving every point that Beverley made. The highlight came when Trae actually roasted Beverley for his infamous celebration in Minnesota after winning a play-in game. If y'all remember, after the Timberwolves got out of the play-in and finally made the playoffs after a drought, Patrick Beverley, which hadn't seen much playoff success in his career, that didn't end up lasting too entirely long. He stood up onto the scorer's table and cried, and this was all for making a playoff game, like making it into the playoffs, winning the play-in. So Trae said, quote, "You talk about winning and impacting winning. How about we name some of these guys? LeBron, Giannis, Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, Ant-Man, and Cat. We're not going to even talk about how we celebrate a play-in win. I win play-in games on the road, and I'm ready to get to the playoffs. You win play-in games at home, and you're standing on the scorer's table acting like it's a championship." That's pretty crazy. It cut deep, and it's especially ironic because, Beverley really criticized Young's ability to win. But Patrick Beverley has been in the NBA for 12 seasons. Well, he was in the NBA for 12 seasons. He is no longer in the NBA. He hasn't retired either. He's just not on a team. But Young's been in the NBA for 7 years, and he's entering his 8th year. And they've won the same amount. Beverley's made the playoffs more times, but he has been on much more elite rosters, and he hasn't had to carry the load that Trae has had to carried. I mean, Patrick Beverley has been carried his entire career, and his services are very much like a thing that it's important to a winning team, especially in his prime. But, he never had to face what Young had to face. He's never been in Trae Young's shoes. Trae wasn't done, though. I mean, he emphasized that he was never once intimidated by Beverley on the court. And at the end of the video, the instrumental of Drake's song Tuscan Leather played, and as you all know, that is the song that has the line, bench players talking like starters, I hate it. And so he actually also titled his video, You Know the Bar. He didn't specifically point to that line, but he really hinted at it to where it's just kind of like, okay, these guys are not even in the same world as players. Like, why are you talking bench players talking like starters? I hate it. This wasn't a fair fight to begin with, and it's probably, we're at the time of this recording, nothing else has happened after Young's 12-minute video, so that might be the last of it. But I mean, Young is elite when it comes to, talking smack, and unlike Beverley, he does back it up with his play. So the takeaway here is, it's bigger than the beef itself. Trae always thrives when he has something to prove. So this honestly is probably going to be the best year of Trae Young's career. He just created his own source of motivation heading into a contract year. So on top of the contract year, he also has this beef with Patrick Beverley, and there's a lot of unfair narratives around him, as there always are. He's going to have an edge on him. That is the same type of confidence and edge that carried him through, Madison Square Garden in 2021, and really fueled his playoff run with the Hawks, and that should excite every Hawks fan, because this is about to be a fun season. We haven't even hit training camp yet, and we've got Trae Young making headlines for beefing with Patrick Beverley. It's just not a fair fight. I mean, I could go on about this for hours, and I'm not going to. But this is just crazy. Let me know what you guys think about this beef, and why is Patrick Beverley even picking a fight with a four-time NBA All-Star, something he has never done. Anyways, let's go ahead and move on to another topic and talk about a move that hasn't gotten the attention it deserves: the signing of Luke Kennard. And it got praised, but it also kind of went under the radar, and the Hawks quietly added him on that 1 year $11 million contract. And while many kind of dismissed it as a depth move, I mean, there's real potential here for immediate success in Atlanta, something that could be pivotal to their playoff run that they're hoping to go on. So Kennard is one of the most efficient three-point shooters in NBA history. He's hit 43.8% of his career attempts from deep, which is the third best mark of all time. That's not just streaky shooting. It's something that Atlanta has known a whole lot over the past several seasons. That's consistency at the highest level. And here's where there's kind of an underrated aspect. The critics are going to point to his defense, for good reason. I mean, he hasn't always been a good defender. He's never been a good defender. And Kennard isn't going to lock anyone down. But here's the key. He has always succeeded when paired with a small guard in the backcourt. The most recent example of that was when his last team, the Memphis Grizzlies. He played next to Ja Morant, and they looked great next to each other. The offensive production far outweighed the defensive concerns. The Grizzlies had a net rating of +8 when those two shared the floor, and their offensive rating was up by 6 when those two shared the floor last season. I mean, just very good numbers. They were always at their best. The Grizzlies have been kind of an inconsistent team, but one thing that stayed consistent over the past few years was when when Morant and Kennard were on the floor together, the team looked good. I mean, you can apply that same formula in Atlanta and, make it so much better. You're replacing Ja Morant with Trae Young, who is a better passer, a stronger shooter, and a much more dynamic offensive force. Suddenly, the idea of Kennard playing heavy minutes alongside Trae Young becomes extremely exciting, because a lot of people pointed to this as a thing where it's like, okay, well, Trae and Kennard aren't going to be able to play many minutes together because both are negative defenders. And yeah, that's true. But Atlanta has acquired so many elite defenders over the past 2 seasons, and internally developed some of these great defenders. And if they're on the floor, but then you've also got Dyson Daniels and Jalen Johnson and Kristaps Porzingis on the floor, that is not going to be a problem. Or you can include a guy like Nickeil Alexander-Walker, you can include Zach Langley. Young and Kennard are going to be on the floor together a whole lot, just because of how Atlanta has structured this team. They've been very strategic with how they've done it, to where they can have the flexibility to plug in 2 negative defenders at the 1 and 2, because Kennard isn't ball dominant. If it's kind of like how when the Hawks acquired DeJounte Murray, well, it kind of looked like a decent idea at first. DeJounte Murray was ball dominant, and he was a poor defender, just like Trae Young. That was a very overrated aspect of his game when he came over to Atlanta, and that's the reason Atlanta really brought him on. They had an idea that he was a strong defender. He ended up not being too good of a defender in Atlanta, and while both were ball dominant, that obviously did not work. But Luke Kennard here is not ball dominant. He's going to be good in the catch and shoot, but when he needs to get a bucket by himself, he can. Think back to when Trae kind of shared the backcourt with Kevin Huerter. Neither were great defenders once again, but the chemistry was there because both understood their role. They understood the spacing and timing and just the sets and really just playing team ball. Now imagine that scenario, but with Kennard, who is going to be playing a lesser role. Kevin Huerter was our starter. Luke Kennard is not going to start. He shouldn't start a single game this upcoming season unless we get pretty injured, which is always a possibility with the Atlanta Hawks. But Kennard is a better player than Kevin Huerter was. I mean, he's a better overall shooter and a player who doesn't need the ball in his hands. I really like the pickup, and I think this is an underrated aspect of it. The Hawks aren't going to get absolutely murdered in the minutes that they have Trae and Kennard on the floor together. In fact, they're going to be very beneficial to the win that they end up getting because of these minutes. So this could be one of the sneakiest signings of the entire offseason. I mean, genuinely, if you look at the pure impact at the end of this upcoming season, I wouldn't be surprised if we're looking at this as one of the most underrated of the offseason. If it works, it might finally give the Hawks the shooting punch that they've lacked in recent years. That would be awesome. They've been at the top of shot quality in the NBA over the past few seasons, but they just haven't been able to shoot the ball. They're getting open looks because of Trae and the offensive scheme, but they haven't been able to convert. Now Atlanta added like 40 plus percentage three-point shooters this offseason, so really address that problem, and it's going to work out in a wide open Eastern Conference. So moving on, former Hawk Jeff Teague made waves recently with a pretty bold prediction about Atlanta's newest star, Kristaps Porzingis, that they brought in with that three-team deal with the Boston Celtics and the Utah Jazz. Teague believes the Hawks are headed to the Eastern Conference Finals this season. He thinks they're going back. And the reasoning, centers around one thing: the health of Kristaps Porzingis and the fact that he is in a contract year. Two very big factors. Teague joked, he said, he in a contract year. You know how this is going to go. He's about to play 70 games. If Kristaps Porzingis plays 70 games, I'm penciling the Hawks in as the team from the Eastern Conference that represents the conference in the NBA Finals. I think that is the biggest thing and this might even be a bigger factor than Jalen Johnson's health, which is a whole nother topic. Honestly, he might be right. Porzingis hasn't reached that 70-game mark since his rookie season. It's been a really long time since Kristaps Porzingis has had a fully healthy season, and durability has always been the biggest concern with his game because we know what he can do on the floor. I mean, even though he hasn't been on the Hawks yet, I mean, he hasn't even suited up as an Atlanta Hawk. I mean, if you're an NBA fan, you know who Kristaps Porzingis is, and you know what he can do on the floor because he's a very impactful player that has had an awesome career so far. It's just the biggest thing has been his health. But with free agency looming, he has every incentive to stay on the court as much as he can and produce at an elite level. Because I'll tell you this much, if he plays 40, 50 games this upcoming season, Atlanta's not going to give him a contract next offseason that reaches over $30 million. I mean, it just wouldn't be worth it if you lock someone in long term who can't stay healthy. If he plays 70 games now, we're looking at someone that Atlanta might lock up long term. This is kind of viewed as like a short term thing, kind of like a 1-year project to see kind of how a elite stretch big would pair with the rest of this core. But I mean, this could be a long term thing if Porzingis proves to stay healthy. The Hawks are counting on him to form a lethal pick and roll, pick and pop combo with Trae Young and the rest of the core, also while protecting the rim at a higher rate than any Atlanta Hawks center has in a very long time. If Porzingis is healthy, Atlanta's ceiling truly skyrockets. So, of course, the East isn't empty, and we always talk about it being wide open, but I mean, it's there. It's there for the taking. I mean, you're going to have teams like the Knicks and the Cavs that are still going to be competing for that number 1 seed and probably will be the 1 and 2 seed. But after that, it's pretty wide open. Teague has a point. With Boston and Indiana dealing with superstar absences, the door is more open than usual. So if the Hawks' new acquisition, Kristaps Porzingis, delivers, they might just shock people and make a deep playoff run, potentially get to the NBA Finals. Teague thinks they're going to go back to the Eastern Conference Finals. I'll take it a step further and say if Porzingis plays 70-plus games, they're in the NBA Finals. So Finally, let's close with some free agency talk and some kind of under the radar news. This isn't a guy who, you're going to get super excited over if the Atlanta Hawks do elect to bring him in, but it could be an underrated pickup. So the Brooklyn Nets, after trading for Kobe Buffkin of Atlanta, they just waived 23-year-old guard Keon Johnson to make room for him, which is really weird. He was one of their more productive players last season, just genuinely. The Nets weren't good at all last season, but and Keon, in spurts wasn't too great, but he was one of their more productive players. He started 56 games. He averaged 10.6 points, 3.8 rebounds, and 2.2 assists. He set personal bests across multiple categories, though his shooting efficiency, which hasn't been good, really ever, he's never shot above 40% for a season from the field, which is really bad. That remains a weakness, but he was still very effective last season given the situation in Brooklyn. If he had a lesser role with a team like the Hawks, he didn't play every night, and this was kind of a guy that we would just depend on for if a player got hurt, if one of the guards got hurt, he needed to slide in. So be it. I think this will be an underrated pickup. The Hawks would be wise to at least consider taking a flyer on him. A short-term Exhibit 10 deal would be, it could give Johnson the chance to compete for a roster spot during training camp. They've got several guys on an Exhibit 10 deal right now. They've got Charles Bassey, Kobe Johnson, Caleb Houston, just so many guys that are fighting for a spot on the roster because the Hawks, theoretically right now, have 13 players on their roster, and the Dante deal is non-guaranteed. The Houston deal is Exhibit 10. So there's plenty of room for a player to make some noise in training camp and then get a spot on the roster. And maybe a guy like Keon Johnson should get the chance to prove it. Atlanta's backcourt rotation is mostly set, but you can never have too many young, hungry players competing for the final spots. You never can. With camp just 2 weeks away, we are right here. This might be the type of low-risk, high-upside move that pays off later in the season and, just in a few seasons, really. So that's going to wrap it up for today's episode of Hawks Latest. So from Trae Young silencing Patrick Beverley, and we're awaiting his response. At the time I'm recording this, he hasn't said anything else, but by the time it's out, maybe he has. So I don't know. Apologies on my end if that's the case. But to Luke Kennard's overlooked signing and underrated aspect of his game, to Jeff Teague's belief in Porzingis and the possibility of adding a guard like Keon Johnson, it's clear that the Hawks are entering camp with some major storylines on every level. So that's going to do it for today's episode of Hawks Latest. If you enjoyed today's breakdown, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single update here on the channel. We're going to be pumping out videos every single day, keeping you guys informed on the latest and the greatest regarding the Atlanta Hawks. But let me know in the comments, what do you guys think about the Pat Bev and Trae Young beef? And, do you think KP can play 70 games? And what do y'all think about Keon Johnson? Once again, I'm Zach Langley, aka Langley ATL, and I will see you guys next time.